Madam President. I rise today to discuss the state of our national defense. First, I want to recognize the brave Americans who were killed in a suicide attack in Syria today. Our deepest sympathies are with the families of those killed and the injured. We are so grateful to these Americans for their service and for their sacrifice. As I enter my 7th year on the Senate Armed Services Committee, I can't help but reflect on our past successes. I'm proud of what we have accomplished by working together to fulfill the first responsibility of our federal government, to provide for the common defense. Together, we've continued the committee's long-standing bipartisan tradition of working to strengthen our military, and we've been effective on a variety of fronts. We've provided our brave men and women in uniform with the resources that they need to carry out the missions that we give them every year through the National Defense Authorization Act. Importantly, for the last 2 years, Congress and the administration have worked together to rebuild the Department of Defense and reorient it to today's threats. As the administration's national defense strategy correctly identifies, the primary challenge to U.S. interests today comes not from terrorist groups, but from Russia and China. In recognition of this fact, Congress increased funding to restore readiness and expand force structure from near historic lows. While progress has been made, significant challenges remain. The bipartisan support for increased defense spending must continue, and Congress must ensure our servicemen and women have the necessary training and equipment for the great power competition that defines the current geopolitical landscape. As part of this effort to ensure our military is prepared for the new threat environment, we must continue modernizing our nuclear forces. Once again, this Congress, I will chair the Armed Services Committee Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, and this issue will be my top priority. Since the end of World War II, our nuclear deterrent has formed the bedrock of our nation's security. With Russia and China increasingly seeking to challenge U.S. interests and to reshape the geopolitical landscape in their favor, the unique role our nuclear forces play in deterring conflict and preventing war is becoming increasingly important. Meanwhile, our warheads and delivery systems age towards obsolescence, as does the infrastructure that maintains our deterrent. Many of these systems have aged far beyond their designed lifetimes. They cannot be sustained indefinitely. Put simply, Madam President, as our nuclear deterrent becomes more important to our nation's defense, the need for nuclear modernization only grows. This conclusion is echoed in the administration's National Defense Strategy, its Nuclear Posture Review, and the bipartisan National Defense Strategy Commission, which described nuclear modernization as a critical imperative. The previous administration under President Obama also recognized the need for modernization and began an effort to recapitalize our nuclear forces. Right now, major programs are underway to replace our legacy systems. This includes the B-21 bomber, which will replace the B-52 and B-2 bombers, and the long-range standoff weapon, which will replace the existing nuclear-armed air-launched cruise missile. The ground-based strategic deterrent is replacing the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. And finally, the Columbia-class submarine will replace the Ohio-class submarines that are currently in service. The command and control networks on which our nuclear forces rely are also in need of replacement, as is the scientific infrastructure that maintains our stockpile of aging warheads. In some cases, such as with the production of plutonium pits, essentially the cores of our nuclear weapons, we must reconstitute lost capabilities. Adding to the challenge as a result of decisions to delay and defer funding, there is no margin for error in the schedule. This is the position we find ourselves in. Our existing platforms are simultaneously aging out, just as their replacements are scheduled to be ready, something General Selva, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, refers to as just-in-time modernization. That means any delay, any error could put at risk our ability to field an effective nuclear deterrent in the future. We cannot allow that to happen. In the face of growing threats, our deterrent must remain strong. As chairman of the Strategic Forces Subcommittee, I understand I carry the solemn responsibility to make sure that the nuclear forces that have deterred conflict, safeguarded our livelihoods, and preserved our nation's power for decades continues to protect the next generation of Americans. While U.S. Strategic Command is located in Sarpy County, Nebraska, it is a national asset with a global mission. Over 180,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians are working every day around the world in support of the command's mission. During this Congress, I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on this key priority and continuing our work in providing for a strong national defense. Thank you, Madam President. I would yield the floor.